Well, I'm joined by Linda Boff, who is the Global Director of Brands for GE. Linda, thanks very much indeed for joining us.
It's great to be here, David.
We're
Thank you.
here in probably one of the most iconic buildings in the world, built by probably maybe the first industrial brand individual in the world. So it's a good place to have this conversation about brands. First of all, let me ask you a sort of a high-level question about the brand of GE. What does it represent?
So, David, the brand at GE has a really special place. I would say we never take brand for granted. It's our license to go to market. It's our license to scale. It's who we are. And GE, as you know, is a branded house. We are GE everywhere. We're GE in the US, we're GE in India, we're GE in energy, we're GE in healthcare. So there's a lot of pride associated with it internally, and I think externally, you know, to have the venerable position, to be as known and trusted and respected as we are is a privilege. I think part of that privilege is also the need to reinvent. You know, when a brand has been around, as we have for, 125 plus years, the challenge we have is not necessarily who knows us, but how do they know us? And staying relevant and staying contemporary is the challenge we think about all the time. But brand is, it's one of the great gifts that we have here at GE.
Well, the BrandZ Top 100 Most Valuable Global Brands has been going for the last 10 years. Only about 40% of brands have been consistently in it for the last 10 years since it was introduced. You're one of those 40%. In fact, you're even better than that, because there are even fewer brands that have remained in the top 20 over that entire period, and you have as well. What is it within the organisation that makes the brand important? And I say that especially because GE is well known for its superior engineering excellence, and a lot of the colleagues at GE, are from an engineering and a science background, not the sort of people who
they haven't
imagine.
Studied marketing and brand science. They've chosen a different science path.
They were the ones that sat in the front of the maths class as well. Us marketeers sat at the back.
Yeah, no, I won't tell you where I sat in the math class. I'm not sure I sat in the math class.
So how does the sort of the notional aspects of branding, things that you can't touch and feel, fit within that context?
So I think for GE, the brand context is similar to our business DNA, in that our DNA as GE is one of invention, reinvention, engineering, science. We were started by an inventor, Thomas Edison. You could kind of say we're the world's oldest startup. I don't know how Uber and Airbnb would take that, but once upon a time we were a startup too. But we still keep that mentality of invention and being in motion. And I think for a brand like GE, being a brand in motion, as we often say, is a real point of pride for us. And I think the relationship to our sort of engineering colleagues, if you will, is this commitment to what's next, this commitment to solving problems, this commitment to having an impact on the world. And that's critical, as you know, and the BrandZ team knows, when it comes to branding. I think the kiss of death for those who weren't fortunate enough to be in that 40% is sometimes standing still. And we are so conscious that standing still is just not who we are.
And how do you imbue what the GE brand is all about to people who don't necessarily understand brand architecture?
Yeah, internally or externally, as you said.
Well, I think internally, both.
Yeah. So I think it's a great question, because I think brand is something that's easy to think about all the time and none of the time, right? It's somewhat easy to take it for granted, and I think part of this is being clear and espousing what the brand stands for. We're a brand that is optimistic at our core. We have a CEO who's optimistic at his core, but we never sit around, despite the sort of tough challenges, the spaces that we're in, affordable health care, energy in remote areas of Africa or China, clean water, efficient transportation. We never sit around and kind of wring our hands. We're always thinking about the possibilities, right? What's next? What are the tough problems? We kind of take pride in the fact that we solve the problems that others may think are impossible. We take pride in the fact that a lot of the businesses that we're in are hard to do, hard to get into, but we approach it from this very optimistic, can do, back to Edison, find out what the world needs kind of way. So I think without hitting people daily over the head and saying brand, 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 what we do is we try to live the brand as much as talk about the monogram or guidelines, et cetera. That being said, we also are trying hard to kind of, as the GE portfolio has changed, and under Jeff Immelt it's changed dramatically. Jeff has said, he's perhaps the only CEO who has bought and sold $100 billion worth of assets. That's a lot of transformation, quite a bit.
That's a lot of advisors' fees.
Yeah, there you go. So the GE of today is a connected industrial company. It's one where we're sitting at this really interesting intersection of software and hardware. But I think permission to get into new spaces, something like software, which I imagine we'll talk more about, is having that solidity of brand, knowing who you are in the marketplace is really critical. And I think whether an employee at some level of the company says that is because of the brand or because it's GE, the sense of pride, ownership, and accountability that goes with that monogram is just a constant here. It's part of the culture.
And both pride and accountability and responsibility are very important aspects of the internal brand, isn't it?
I think that's right. I mean, it's not just the fact that we're GE, but the fact that comes with a responsibility, right? What's the Superman line or Spider-Man with great powers comes great accountability? I'm sure I've just messed that up, but whatever it is, we very much believe that.
You talked about Jeff Immelt and obviously John Welsh before him. Both, maybe they were both the very first sort of business people's brands that were created around the world. They both have a reputation for being sort of pretty hard-nosed Six Sigma style sort of managers, very sort of balance sheet, numbers oriented. How do brand conversations sort of work in the context of that leadership? Is it?
I can't speak to Jack because I never worked for a GE that Jack Welch was the chairman of, but I can very happily speak to Jeff. I would say Jeff in some ways is our biggest brand champion. He knows how important brand is. He pushes us constantly to think about how to be relevant as a brand, how to be meaningful to audiences that are both traditional, say our investor audience, as well as new audiences. We employ 300,000 people. That means we're constantly looking for the best new talent in engineering, in software, in computer science. To do that, to sort of attract the best and the brightest, brand is incredibly important. But it's something that Jeff values, and I think I would say Jeff is one of the most innovative people I have ever met. Without Jeff and Beth Comstock, our wonderful CMO, there would not have been an eco-imagination, there would not have been a health imagination, there would not, I think, have been an industrial internet. I think both of them have this remarkable ability to not just see around corners and see what's next, but look at how to develop markets horizontally. Each of those are horizontal plays, if you will, for us. And something we're kind of fond of saying here is, we're very comfortable driving mind share before market share. Something like the industrial internet, which we launched about 4 years ago as a concept, is very simply the internet of big things, right? We all know the internet of things. This is the internet of jet engines and locomotives and the like. And it was, while we had a lot of software business, the concept behind that was a concept before we were really a fully operational software center, which we are now in the Valley. Similarly with eco-imagination, Jeff had this fabulous idea, green is green, right? This wasn't about hugging trees so much as saying that efficiency and clean tech is good for our customers, it's good for the economy, it's good for us. That's pretty advanced thinking, hard-nosed or not.
I mean, you do have the opportunity to create tremendous amount of change, and I think both those examples you cite are great forward-thinking ways of how business can have a tremendous impact both on the world but also on the environment as well. You're in a period of change. I suppose most businesses, there's not a business on the planet at the moment that's not undergoing a tremendous amount of change. You're undergoing change both from a structure, from the type of businesses that you own and operate, and also from things unbelievably tangible. There's not much more tangible than a jet engine, to things that are much more sort of intangible, like software. How is that journey being looked at from a brand perspective within the organisation now?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, some of it does go to the fact that the future for GE will be a future that is software enabled. And the software story is one that is, I think, captivating everybody, whether it's the software that enables your phone or the cloud that enables enterprise software or something, much more industrial, which obviously is where we're headed. I think the challenge and the opportunity for a company like GE is one that we are everywhere, and at the same time, we can be invisible. We're sitting here in this lovely room. The air conditioning's on, the lights are on. I presume the electricity is working for the camera. But we're not sitting here thinking about the fact that the energy's working. The energy's working. If it stopped, we'd think about it. You presume certain things. So there's this intangible part of our brand, despite the fact that we make these big machines at scale. So I think for us as a brand, it's talking about the outcomes and the impact of a lot of what we do versus the fact that, hey, the lights are on, let's focus on that. So I'd say that's the first. The second is most people, as we talked about a little bit earlier, know GE. We're not a brand that is one where people say, yeah, I never heard of GE. So what we try very hard to do as a brand is to show up in ways that unexpectedly remind people of who we are at our core, that we are a company that is deeply committed to invention. So we don't waste a lot of time sitting around and saying, how do we make jet engines cool? But we spend a lot of time saying, jet engines are amazingly cool. How do we show that to people? How do we sort of open the curtains, peel back the onion, and reveal that? And that's led us to places like, being one of the first brands on Instagram to show the nobility and glory of our big machines, because they are not necessarily something that's out in plain sight. Let's bring somebody and show them how a jet engine works. Let's bring them to the top of a wind turbine. So funnily enough, it's opened up opportunities.
Interesting. So almost going back to the sort of the Industrial Revolution, the Lowry pictures, bringing to life the industrial white heat.
Yes.
Well, today's version of what the industrial white heat is all about.
I think that's exactly right. And I think in a world where we are all surrounded by things that are ethereal, wonderful but ethereal. You use Snapchat, the image goes away. You have apps. I use many apps that I love. I think there's a bit of a craving for things that are permanent, for things that are lasting, for infrastructure that will make roads in developing worlds safer, that will give people the opportunity to travel on their first plane. To us sitting here at 30 Rock, that feels crazy. I wish I could, not take as many planes as I do. But, this idea of developing things that have a real lasting impact and a scale is really appealing, and I think speaks to why a lot of people work at GE and love it.
You talked about various different social apps at the moment. In a sense, social networking could well be seen as the antipathy of anything to do with the business world, in a sense. So how do you see social media in a B2B context?
Yeah. So we are probably, David, surprisingly one of the early adopters, first movers when it comes to digital and social media. We have embraced. We have been fast. We have sometimes run toward the light, the shiny object, but it's been strategic. And the reason we have done that is, as a brand, GE has never been afraid to adapt be early, experiment, go to market with a first, whether it's an MRI or a jet engine. And that same DNA has propelled us to say, we want to be early. We want to be the first brand to be on Twitter's Vine. We want to be on Snapchat early. We want to be on Instagram. I can give you, example after example, because it reinforces who we are as a company. That's number one. Number two, we want to be, as marketers, where people are spending their time. And people are still spending a lot of time doing things that I grew up with, television. People still watch television. They watch a lot of live events, and they binge watch. But increasingly, people are spending time on digital media. And I think for a brand as big, ubiquitous as we are, to not think about where our customers, our potential customers, our future employees, the companies we want to partner with might hear about us is a mistake.
But do you think there are any specific sort of strategies for B2B players that they need to adopt in a social sort of network? And
yes and no. To be honest, yes and no. I rarely will describe us as B2B, because in the end of the day, our customer is a human. And they are experiencing all kinds of different things. And that may be a business decision maker who's looking at spreadsheets in the morning, but that business decision maker is just as influenced by everything else around him or her. And we're seeing this with things like social selling. I won't do the numbers yet, but we did a very small search marketing campaign that's led to hundreds of millions of dollars of opportunity. I say that because where do people begin their search for information? Often it's online. So once again, whether we're B2B or B2C, if you're not there online when and where people are trying to find you, it's a mistake, in our opinion. I would say, often I'm asked, well, you're not going to sell a jet engine online. I'm not sure you sell Coca-Cola online either.
We certainly can't drink it online.
You certainly can't drink it online. That's right.
I think most companies are challenged with the new millennials, both as potential purchasers of their products and also as employees as well. What advice would you give for how now to deal with not only a changing world, but very much a changing consumer?
Yeah. Well, part of it is what we talked about, I think, is to show up in a variety of places, ways, and times where they are likely to intersect with us. I would say that's number one. I would say number two is get comfortable with what they're reading, what they're viewing, what they're seeing, what their interests are. And we've done that time and again. I'll give you a fun example. Last year, actually almost exactly a year ago, was the 45th anniversary of the moon landing.
Gosh, was it as long ago as that? Wow.
I know, right? GE played a role in the moon landing. We have, in the boots that Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin wore, there was GE materials in the boots. So last summer, we brought out a limited edition moon boot, a sneaker, with advanced materials, which is something that's quite important to the company. We put them on sale. They sold out in like 5 minutes. And the whole idea was to sort of remind young people, sneakerheads, people who are sort of part of today's culture, many of them are probably down there in Brooklyn, that GE both had a role in history in a moment, but more importantly has a role in the future, which is about creating materials that are lighter, faster, sort of super materials, if you will. So we look for moments of intersection, and we try to do it in a way that's inherently us, but with an eye toward cultural memes. I'll give you another fun example. South by Southwest is a big gathering, as we both know. Quite a few millennials there, young people, young-minded as well. So this past year, as a way to talk about what we're doing in data, we created a 12-foot super smoker, and we called it our Barbecue Research Center. And we invited people to, as you love to do at South by, taste barbecue. But the whole thing was programmed based on data, and we had a chemical engineer running it. Another more current, even more current example is we created something which leaning into emojis. Everybody's speaking emoji. I'm still working on my emoji language. So we created a periodic table. Again, our scientific roots, chemistry periodic table, but it's an emoji table of science. So we
Nice idea.
yeah, exactly. So we're constantly looking for ways that are steeped in who we are, a company, science, innovation. That's our core. But to translate it in ways that are current, that are relatable, that are unexpected. Sometimes they're a little fun.
Well, I suppose given the deep history you've got, you don't get a better sort of historical credential than Edison in a sense.
You don't.
Being able to delve deep into that traditional heritage
Yeah.
with modernity is a very powerful position to be in.
Yes.
So, looking into the crystal ball, what would you see inside it, both for, I suppose, for us marketeers over the course of the next 10 years, but also for GE as well, in the context of maintaining and building strong, valuable brands?
Yeah. I think there are a few things to sort of be the brand of the future. This is a line I've stolen from a friend, which I think it's so relevant, which is market in the year you live in. I think as marketers, if we're not utterly present in what's happening today, if we're sort of hungering for, but that worked, I think if those days were ever longed for, they can't be anymore. So one is market today, market in the year you live in. The second is, I think brands and brand managers and marketers have to be on the playing field. Once again, I think there was once a time, I was never part of this time, by the way, where you brand managers kind of could sit back and their agencies sort of helped and brought it all to life.
In a funny way, they could actually manage the brand. I mean, now the brand is not in anyone's control.
No, and the brand is so many things, right? The brand is every way that you show up. And I think for a modern marketer, they have to be not just on the playing field, but really sort of directing all the activity, have a clear vision as to the future. The third is, I think we have to slavishly put the customer out there. As many things as we try and experiment with, we always come back to what the user experience is. And if the experience for the user is not going to be simple, frictionless, and pleasant, there's no point in us doing it. Just because we can do something doesn't mean we should do something. And then the last, I guess, I'd offer is, I think the media landscape, as we've all known it, is changing so dramatically. Dramatically in terms of the players, in terms of the distribution, in terms of the opportunities to watch, both on the hardware side, how you watch something, and that's not just from a mobile point of view, but from a headset point of view, virtual reality, augmented reality, etc. That I think we will see things that we actually can't even imagine right now. We're spending a lot of time at GE sort of playing around with virtual reality. We'll see what that does. But from an engineering point of view, to be able to put somebody in a situation, we just launched a piece of VR storytelling this week that puts you inside the brain. And
I don't not said I'd like that.
I know, but to be able to sort of venture to new places that are technology enabled in a way that hasn't been before, I think is incredible. All that being said, I still think, and we certainly hold by the fact that being creative in our storytelling and finding ways to drive impact that are not, for us at least, about the biggest spend, but about shouting louder than we spend, about being impactful and efficient at the same time. Being creative, being a storyteller, connecting with customers, those things remain constant.
The mantra, I suppose, of big, successful, valuable brands over time is consistency. You've painted a picture of great change. I suppose an acceleration of the technology and the developments of that over the course of the next few years. Last question, from a brand perspective, what is going to be the rock? I mean, here we are at Rockefeller Plaza. What is going to be the rock that's going to hold the consistency of what the GE proposition is going to be across all of the newness and innovation and product sectors you're going to be in the future?
Yeah, it's such a good question. It's a great one to end on. It's going to sound overly simple, but it is true to the core, which is one GE brand globally. You know, we need to be GE wherever we are. And for a company that is, you know, now in 170 countries, as many of your top brands I know are obviously very global, that's more important than ever. I think all of us have to think about global, right? How are you that consistent brand and yet relevant? But I think as we have experimented, have looked at how to be local, if we don't adhere to the big GE, what the brand is fundamentally about, what we stand for, what our people stand for, we lose a lot. So I think we all have to kind of hold on to, we have a brand, it means a great deal, it's been hard won over 125 years, but if that's all it is, and we don't iterate and change and move in terms of how it's expressed, then that's where I think you start to lose ground.
Right, well, Linda Boff, Executive Director, Global Brands for GE, here at GE Head Office of Rockefeller Plaza on the 52nd floor with an astonishing view, but also an astonishing history of GE's contribution to the world. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you, David. It's been a great pleasure.